So what would a war between the US, Israel, and Iran really mean for the world? We're about to dive into the perspective of a prominent Chinese scholar, Victor Gao, who has this incredibly stark analysis of the conflict, its global consequences, and what he sees as a massive historic shift in power. And trust me, his view is absolutely uncompromising. Right off the bat, you can see Gao does not mince words. He frames any conflict like this not as some limited skirmish, but as a completely illegal war of aggression. This quote right here really sets the tone for his entire analysis. This is a high-stakes game with consequences that ripple out way, way beyond the Middle East. Okay, so where does a global power like China fit into all this? Well, according to Gao, they're in a very complicated and, as he calls it, awkward position. They're basically walking a diplomatic tightrope. And this slide really gets to the heart of that tension. See, on one hand, Gao says China flat out condemns the war. They see it as a clear violation of Iran's sovereignty. But on the other hand, they desperately need to stop this thing from spiraling out of control. Why? Because it threatens vital energy routes like the Strait of Hormuz, which are just critical for China's economy. And here's a perfect example of that diplomatic bind in action. At the UN, a resolution came up that focused only on Iran's retaliation, but kind of ignored the initial aggression. So what did China do? They abstained. Gao explains this wasn't them giving a thumbs up or anything. It was just a reflection of that tough balancing act between trying to uphold international law and trying to keep the lights on for the global economy. But, the fallout from something like this isn't just about diplomacy. Gao argues that a long drawn-out war would kick off a devastating chain reaction for the entire world. He lays it out as three distinct crises, one tumbling right after the other. It all starts with an energy crisis, which Gao points out is kind of already happening with all the disruptions to oil and gas. That massive shock to the energy market then pretty much guarantees a global economic crisis as trade just seizes up. And finally, when those two disasters collide, you get what Gao calls an unprecedented financial crisis, one that could bring the whole global system crashing down. For him, these aren't just possibilities, they're inevitable. So the takeaway here from Gao is really stark. There is no managing this situation. There's no clever way to navigate through it. The only way to stop this catastrophic domino effect is to stop the war, period. So how on earth do you even begin to do that? Well, Gao offers this really memorable analogy he calls the elephant in the ditch to explain exactly how the world needs to act. Gao argues the solution has to follow this very strict order. Step 1, just get the elephant out of the ditch. That means stop the fighting right now. Only after that's done can you move to step 2, figure out why the elephant fell in the first place, get to the root causes. And then finally, step 3 is about building a bridge, remaking global security so this kind of thing never happens again. His big point is that the world is stuck arguing about step 2 while the elephant is still suffering in the ditch. You just can't skip ahead. Now, zooming way out, Gao makes an even bigger, more profound argument. He claims this war isn't just another conflict in a troubled region. No, he sees it as a major historical turning point, one that signals the end of an entire era of global politics. I mean, that is a truly bold prediction. Gao is pinpointing the year 2026, the year this hypothetical war begins, as the exact moment future historians are going to look back on and say, yep, that's where the end of Pax Americana began. So what exactly is Pax Americana? Well, it's the term for the whole period after World War II. It's been an era of, let's say, relative global stability, largely because it was backed up by the overwhelming military and economic power of the United States. So the end of that? Yeah, that would be a monumental shift in how the world works. So why does Gao think this? He argues that Iran's capabilities have totally punctured the myth that US and Israeli anti-missile systems are invincible. It's cracked that American security shield wide open. And when that happens, you expose a deep military vulnerability. So what happens next? Key allies who have relied on that shield, think Japan and South Korea, are now forced to second-guess their security deals. In Gao's view, the US is literally speeding up its own decline. And that brings us to the final point. Gao addresses the most dangerous possible escalation of all, the one that could change everything in a single flash. He poses this absolutely chilling question. What happens if this conflict goes nuclear? What if Israel decides to use a tactical nuclear weapon against Iran?
his answer is just stunning. It's completely unequivocal. He doesn't just predict some international condemnation. He predicts the absolute total demise of Israel as a state.
And his logic is this. An act like that would instantly make Israel, in his words, public enemy #1 of mankind. The global backlash would be off the charts. And what's more, it would trigger a frantic, unstoppable nuclear arms race all across the region, as every other country would scramble to get their own deterrent. The consequences, he says, would be absolute. So we're left with this powerful, deeply unsettling analysis. From diplomatic tightropes to global crises and the potential end of an entire era, Victor Gao paints a picture of a world on a knife's edge. He's claiming this isn't just another war, but a real turning point for the whole global order. And the question he leaves us with is, what comes next?